Welcome to the Female Stoic podcast. My name is Stephanie Poppins, and I am an advocate for literary empowerment. That means I believe the examples set by the literary masters can broaden our life perspective, create increased self-awareness, and empower us to overcome the obstacles we encounter here in the 21st century. By listening and referring what we hear to Stoic philosophy, we can foster a strong sense of self and navigate the world more effectively. This podcast takes the form of both discussions and meditations. And if you like what you hear, you might consider looking me up on my socials, where I post empowering videos every day. Or you may like my classic audiobooks and original stories available on my website, newworldbooks.co.uk. Happy listening. Today's episode is about Anne Elliot and the Stoic principle of temperance. Anne Elliot, as you may know, is a character from Jane Austen's novel Persuasion. So we're going to be talking about her today, and we are going to be looking at the settings that Austen has placed her in and how that affects her Stoic development. Right, so as I said, today's episode is about personal development and setting, where we are physically, our location now, and the places we have been in our lives and how they have affected our development, focusing again on the Stoic principle of temperance. We are using Anne Elliot, the protagonist in Persuasion, as our shining light, our perfect example, our seasoned protagonist. By the end of the novel, she really is much of a delight. I have just finished completing my full audiobook of Persuasion, so if you want to check that out, look that up. Persuasion by Jane Austen, audiobook, read by Stephanie Poppins and published by New World Books. So let's look at Anne Elliot, a character that personifies temperance in her actions, and as we follow the novel's trajectory, the various demands, the settings that she is placed in subject her to various challenges, and the novel is about how she copes with that. So, of course, as with the other of Jane Austen's novels, it is a romance, and there is a love connection there that goes by the name of Captain Wentworth. And Captain Wentworth is somebody who has been rejected by her in the past, and the novel is about her coming to a place where she learns to forgive herself, he learns to make peace with, and she learns to make peace with the decision, and gains a sense of balance over how important she places the voices of others regarding the actions that she decides to take. And of course we have a journal exercise which we have every week. So what we're going to do first is look at the principle of temperance, the Stoic principle of temperance. As you know, there are principles that we use to refer to when we are checking in with our virtue that we're protecting in our inner citadel. And this principle is about everything in balance. Aristotle called it the golden mean, which explains that virtue is found somewhere in the middle, between excess and deficiency. So we're trying to create a liberality with our lives because we understand as Stoics that excess of desire is synonymous with discontent and dissatisfaction. It's self-defeating. And when we look at the character of Anne Elliot, we can see that she manages this very well, especially for a young girl who has been placed in a difficult situation. She has no mother. She is not favoured at all by her surviving father. She has two sisters. One, because she married, becomes acceptable to her father, and the other one who's the apple of her father's eye. And of course Anne is stuck in the middle. Epictetus says, curb your desire. Don't set your heart on so many things and you will get what you need. So the Stoic principle of knowledge, we understand that if we have what is essential to us, that is in itself abundance. That is enough. And we can interchange the idea of temperance with the idea of self-control, not just towards material goods, but towards pleasure, pain, admiration, contempt, failure or triumph, any extreme reactivity, any emotion that is reactive. We temper that so that we gain mastery over that, so we protect our inner citadel, our inner virtue. We're guarding against extremes. We're not relying on fleeting pleasure to sustain us, and we understand that it cannot sustain us. So let's go to the journal exercise. Each week we have an exercise, and this week I am asking you to list the places that you have lived, because we're looking at locations today and how they have affected our development, specifically referring to how we manage our reactivity. So we're going to list the places we have lived, and we're going to relate our personal development to those places. Who were we in each location? So throughout the course of a life, you move to different locations, different houses, different settings. Within those settings, there are different people. It's important to note your settings and then what age you were in that setting. What did your relationships look like in that setting? How would the world have seen you at that time, when you were that age, living in that place? And it's significant, the location you are in is relevant to your development and how you react towards things, and which is also closely related to your age. So, for example, if you are in a busy urban environment where people are coming and going, neighbours, perhaps there are a lot of rented apartments, lots of people are moving around, there might be noise outside, a lot of activity, you will be behaving and able to manage your behaviours in a different way than if you are in a rural setting where there is little to no noise and you are surrounded by nature. So the journal exercise today is to list the places we have lived and relate our personal development to that place. Why is this relevant? Because it's good to look back and understand that our life is not just a series of situations we've fallen into and reactive choices that we've made. They are related to our environment, to the relationships, what the relationships look with the people around us who were in that environment with us at that time, and of course what age we were at that time. Where did we place our energy when we were in that setting? So if we were a child, and perhaps there were some family challenges at the time, where did we place our energy? What did we do? Did we use our energy to escape? And therefore, how much control did we have over our emotions at that time? We're talking about the Stoic principle of temperance, so how we managed our emotions at that time, our emotional reactions to things. And you will see when you do this journal exercise over time, the way you manage your reactions to people around you, the environment itself will have changed. And this is what Austen does in Persuasion so well. She sets Elliot up, and Austen is known for the emphasis she places on location. So let's look at Anne Elliot, the character, and then we will look at the location she finds herself in. So she's embodying this form of Stoicism that's more hopeful and internally driven. She's an attractive character who has, to all intents and purposes, at the beginning of the novel, we find her having lost much of her appeal because she is suffering internally at the loss of a love match that she had years before. This loss was not by her own hand. She was guided, shall we say. She was encouraged to reject somebody that she loved. And in the beginning of the novel, we see her in a darker place than she previously was. But she's very quiet about it. She also has so she sacrificed this love match. She has nothing else on the horizon. And she has no affection shown her, or very, very little, familiarly speaking. So she's quite isolated. And the story's focusing on her inner resilience, her reason rather than outward emotion. She's very quiet about it, as I said. She endures hardship, she conforms to societal duties, but she maintains a hopeful outlook throughout this self-reflection and reasoning. That strength in itself, this internal fortitude that she practices and that she demonstrates. She's self-determined, and even though it would feel, as a person in that setting, as a young person, that now her mother died, she's going to have to move locations, but she has been in this location, Kellynch Hall, and she has been, to all intents and purposes, left there. And to her own devices largely, because it feels like nobody wants her. And yet, she carries on. You may say, what choice is she? But she continues to find hope in small things. And of course she has an unwavering hope for a reunion with this Captain Wentworth. A key aspect of her resilience is the inner dialogue we see in the novel. She reasons with her own feelings. She scolds herself for questioning his sentiments. She tries to reason herself out of her feelings by focusing on the positives. She understands that she has to conform somewhat to societal expectation, but she still has choices. So her sister Mary marries, and she is put forward as a possible love match before her sister Mary is in the frame, and she rejects that. So she still creates her own sense of agency. And this is her inner strength, this deep inner strength and maturity, even though she's young. She carries herself very well. She's very sure of who she is. And Austen writes these female characters so well at a time when it was much a compromise to be a woman. One does not love a place the less for having suffered in it, says Anne Elliot. And as we see, she has to move out of Kellynch Hall. And yet, in the beginning, and she has suffered there, but she still maintains that she loves the place because she once had a mother in this place. Her father moves with her elder sister, Elizabeth, the favourite, to Bath. Her other sister is quite happily married to all intents and purposes, and she is stuck somewhere in the middle. So there's this gradual widening. Austen widens her physical and mental horizons. She starts off in a place that represents the past and all the pain of the past. And then what Austen does is she changes her location, which represents hope. And she's a bit of a homebody, is Anne. She likes to be in her own environment, and she's quite happy to do so. She's not a social animal. And again, this association of place and character is always significant in Austen's fiction. The change of location is testing her integrity. It's calling for her to adapt and seeing how she's going to do that whilst keeping faith with her principles. She's not performing to strangers. She is not changing who she is, even though at times she is in very busy social situations. She maintains her resolve. So Anne Elliot, if we compare her to, say, the Bennet sisters, she's at least 6 years sadder and wiser than previous heroines. So even though she's younger, she has than her older sister, who's the preferred sister. She has many, many years of sad experience under her belt as we open the novel. And she now needs to find out where she belongs, because she doesn't really belong anywhere. She goes to Bath and spends some time there. She goes to her sister Mary's house and spends some time there, looking after her sister's children. But she still she can't go back to Kellynch Hall because that's now been rented out by a relative of Captain Wentworth. So she's floating, and she has to maintain a resolve rather than be reactive to the challenges of each environment. Austen says, no, I'm going to make her really resilient, and I'm going to make her the answer when people have a lot of questions. Somewhat overlooked compared to some characters, but she is in fact, stoically speaking, a very strong character. And yet this sorrow accompanies her throughout, but you would not know it to look at her. So the first 4.5 chapters, she's at Kellynch. Inferior value, haggard, faded and thin, she is described as, a nobody who carries no weight. Disappointments, oppositions, miseries, regrets. And then, after 13 years of missing a mother, almost 8 of mourning this lost lover, she loses her bloom, as is quoted. And she has to relinquish the love that she didn't want to leave. It's a kind of a death, a kind of a sacrifice of future happiness. And it's almost as though she is placed in a situation where she is not allowed to have happiness. Everybody's plotting around her to remove her of her happiness, even though they wear the masks of friends. And we've got this Lady Russell, who is supposedly a good friend of the family and her father, and Anne has no choice but to be dependent upon her because she doesn't have any other matriarchal influence in her life. So she takes her guidance and she essentially sacrifices her happiness. So how does she exist within this? Well, it's habit. She has her small practices, things she does every day, and that sustains her. And this suffering reminds her that she is alive, she's still feeling, love was once possible, it may be possible again, and she takes the Stoic approach where she is holding on to the positives because she understands that she once owned those and she can control her thoughts and what she's focusing on. And then, of course, she moves. Now, she finds herself at Uppercross, which is her sister Mary's husband's house. And her husband, Charles Musgrove, which is Anne's brother-in-law, has no interest in Kellynch. The preoccupations, the history, nothing. So it's very all-encompassing. She is there much as a sisterly influence and as an aunt also to her nieces and nephews. It's all encompassing, but she feels nothing. She feels a nothingness within that because she is only really there as a dog's body. She is of value to them as somebody who can look after the children, but stoically she's adaptable and sympathetic. Rather than being bitter about where's my house, where's my life, it's very much she is there to support others. But of course, this is to her benefit because she is now away from her father and watching her father idolize her elder sister. She's in this sense of, it's like an anaesthetized tranquility where she can just not feel too much. Everything's so busy, just focus on the children. But of course, this tranquility is not to last. And along comes the return of Captain Wentworth. And now it starts all over again. This passive suffering is now an active suffering. Quote, agitation, shudderings and confusion. To begin with, she persuades herself she will be insensible to his close proximity, but this acute agitation is betrayed by her mental responses on their first meeting. She gets through it, and then as he leaves, she says to herself, "It's over, it's over." Again and again and again, in nervous gratitude, the worst is over. That's in chapter 7. So what am I saying? I'm saying each location has its effect on her. Each location represents something, and it's interesting to see how she navigates her feelings and her reactions in each setting. And she is placed in each setting for a reason, to showcase how she manages as a protagonist her skills. Charles Musgrove, her sister Mary, are not interested, especially Mary. Charles has some sympathy, but Mary has none. They're not interested at all in Anne, other than somebody to help with the children. How does she navigate that? How does she survive in that setting? How did she survive in Kellynch Hall? This is why we look at literature to guide us, because the answers are there. They've already been written. And with use of analogy, we can see that it is possible to read into each protagonist in each novel the lessons they can teach us. And there's a cycle that goes with every place that she visits and stays in. She moves from despair to hope, then she represses her feelings, but her physical and mental state are managed by herself, and she doesn't allow them to dominate or control the choices that she makes. And that's the point here. In the beginning of the novel, we see her, she's lost her bloom. And as time moves on, we see her gain the life and the blush in her cheeks and her zest. But the words, the acceptance, the outward appearance is the same, remains the same throughout. Because she understands that, whatever anybody says, so altered that he should not have known her again. How ill she looks. She understands that if she lets those voices control her, she's finished. As I say each week, it is about Stoic survival, and she is trying to survive in a loveless environment where choices have been made for her, where she's been guided in her naivety, and she is trying to navigate her way through that stoically. And of course then we have her vacation in Lyme, which is by the sea, and they have a beautiful, we always have this connection with the Navy or naval officers. Jane Austen had two brothers. Last week I went to see at Harewood House, which is very close to where I live, a exhibition that had first editions of Jane Austen's works, had the costumes from Pride and Prejudice, and had some journals of her brothers who were both naval officers. And obviously that played a huge part in her life, and we can see in her novels this reference to that frequently. So Anne goes to stay by the sea, and it's very refreshing and brings out the colour in her cheeks, and it's all hope. And she makes friends, and she can see in this setting, which is a metaphorical opening up of the world to Anne. As we look out to sea, we can see there is hope, there are choices, there is something else happening. Again, the setting, going back to the setting and the significance of that. And yet it is not Anne who is jumping down the steps, leaping into the arms of Captain Wentworth, falling flat on her face and ending up in a semi-comatose state. Because she's practicing temperance. She understands, I'm not a little child. I have the same energy and life and excitement. I can feel it coming back to me. But it's my job to protect myself. And I can't quite let this zest for life that I'm feeling being by the sea, I can't quite let it be such that I lose all sense of who I am, because I understand that I am being judged and looked upon by this man that I am still in love with, and I need to be very careful here. And all the while she is watching Captain Wentworth and Louisa, who is one of Charles Musgrove, her brother-in-law's sisters. And of course she is dead set on Captain Wentworth, but she's a bit frivolous and flighty and not very particularly intelligent, not particularly bright, and certainly not in control of her actions, which obviously is juxtaposed with our Anne, who holds it all together in a disastrous situation, which is that Louisa then, as I say, falls flat on her face, and everybody's up in arms apart from Anne. Anne has been through some trials, and because of that, she is able to hold it together. And of course, this impresses Captain Wentworth, and eventually she gets her man. So what are we saying? We're saying there's a stoic element of temperance within this novel. She is not an Elizabeth Bennet. She is not particularly courageous in terms of making big statements or big rejections or running across wet fields and muddying her skirts. She's a little bit more liberal, I suppose you would say, in so much as she feels things keenly, but she tries to protect herself by stepping back from huge, chaotic, expressive moments, because she has experienced chaos. She has experienced the loss of her mother. She has experienced the loss of somebody that she was in love with. She has seen her father. The reason he leaves Kellynch Hall in the beginning is because he's in debt. He's in debt because he is irresponsible, financially speaking. So she's seen him lose a lot of his money. She's seen his materialistic behaviour and the fleetingness of her sister's affection for her older sister's affection. and their willingness to adopt into their lives somebody who is due to inherit the estate, a Mr. Elliot, and throw themselves at anybody who they consider to be socially superior or on the same level footing, and thinks, no, that's not for me. And she suffers internally, quietly, staidly, but this reflects her inner resolve, this reflects her inner strength. And the various settings are challenges. Austen puts her in different settings, is challenge her in different ways so that we, as the reader, can see, what's going to happen here? This is another challenge. Will she rise to it? And it's very much, the novel is very much all about Anne. So not too many subplots going on. But I feel the love of this character, the love Austen has for this character through the lines. And again, going back to it now, as I have been doing the last couple of weeks, and just checking my audio book, making sure everything's perfect, really reliving those moments, I can say I really felt that affection for the stoic resolve that Anne demonstrates. And it seems to me that Austen respected that. That was something that she esteemed. We see stoic characters, female characters, peppered in each of her novels and juxtaposed with somebody who is completely chaotic in their expressions. And it's as though she's poking fun at those comical characters. It's as though it's an in-joke. And Anne is definitely in on it. She is with us. She understands the ridiculousness of others. And that's where we are today. So to recap, our journal exercises listing the places we've lived, relating our personal development to that place, and looking at the impact those settings have had on us, and where we place our energy within those settings, within that time of our life, and how far we've developed from there, and relating that to the Stoic principle of temperance, which is practicing a balanced attitude to our experiences, neither craving nor demanding, but understanding that the inner peace comes within an acceptance of what we already have, be that relationships, be that material things. Hey, Stephanie here. Thank you for listening to the Female Stoic podcast. It is an honour, and I just want to say I really appreciate you being here. It's amazing the power of women in literature and the Stoic messages they have to share. Please, if you can, return the favour by spreading their words and sharing this podcast far and wide, so more of us can benefit from their wisdom. And don't forget to leave a review if you like what you heard. See you next time.